Next on Arizona 360, a development boom in Oro Valley leads to great expectations and growing pains.
Let's build it all in a 6 to 8 year period, inconvenience everybody, and then just enjoy life.
Plus the legal limbo created by the ongoing immigration debate.
And they're being used as political pawns for a bigger agenda.
And providing a safe place for Tucson's LGBTQ teens.
There is a whole community here that supports you, loves you, and wants you to thrive.
Hello and welcome to Arizona 360. I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thank you for joining us. A rare move this week for the Pima County Board of Supervisors when Democratic Supervisor Ramon Valadez switched his vote on a grant worth more than $1 million. Operation Stonegarden is a federal grant worth $1.4 million. It covers the Pima County Sheriff's Department's expenses related to enforcing border security. In voting yes, Valadez voted against fellow Democrats. The supervisor, though, told me this is not a partisan issue.
Look, we've taken very clear positions against the immigration policy of our country so far, against the wall, in favor of DACA, against our policy because, frankly, it's broken. But the problem that we keep hearing was that not only is it broken, it's causing damage to our families.
Are there actually documented cases of racial profiling? Because in your yes vote, you said there should be conditions. Why conditions now?
I happen to be an engineer by education, so I'm all about analyzing the problem and trying to find a solution. Now, here's the change that would occur. We turn down the funding. When Border Patrol calls the Sheriff's Department, it doesn't change whether or not they respond. Legally and ethically, they have to respond. So you haven't changed that. You haven't gotten the written policy to tell deputies what they can and cannot do when it comes to immigration. You haven't educated them. You haven't set up an oversight committee to make sure that racial profiling isn't happening. You haven't done anything.
Is this political? This is the first time in decades we've had a Republican sheriff. Is that what this is about?
I can't answer the question. I don't know what the motivation is, and I won't even try and get into their heads because that's not a right thing for me to do. What I can tell you is I can understand the fear people are feeling. Over the last year and a half, we've heard a lot of things that legitimately need to be discussed in an open setting, need to be fixed, because frankly, what we've heard in terms of the discussion coming out of Washington, D.C. has not been positive.
You've been on the board since 2003?
September 30th of 2003.
We've had Stonegarden all this time.
Since 2004.
Do you acknowledge that perhaps you haven't done your due diligence as a public servant to really look at these grants and what it required?
That's possible. And you know what? And I will tell you that the buck stops here. Any of the elected officials, whether or not we knew, we should have known. I have to take responsibility for that. I have to own that, and I do. But going forward, we're going to have changes. Is there racial profiling? Maybe. Don't know. But I need to know. Because if there is, you know what, and it's tied to this funding, I'm going to tell you ahead of time, we're not going to take this funding again if the racial profiling is being caused by this. But I've got to know, and we're setting up a citizens committee.
You'd be hard-pressed to find a border county that says no to the feds when it comes to dollars used for border security.
No, I understand that, but I will assure you that if those dollars are causing some of the things, and that's why we're setting up this public process, then we'll be the first to say no.
Why not leave this issue to the experts? You say a citizens committee to look at things, but why not leave it to law enforcement?
Because citizens should always be able to have oversight of their government, regardless of whether it's law enforcement, the policy end of it, the financial end of it. Look, Pima County is about transparency. If we're doing something wrong, then you know what? Let's all find out about it, talk to each other, and figure out a solution. Let's not vote no and twiddle our thumbs. That's just not acceptable to me.
A shift in habits for some communities, churches and schools taking precautions to reduce the risk of getting the flu. Since October, the flu has been linked to more than 450 deaths in Arizona, and that includes 2 children. Across the country, the flu is still considered widespread. Here's a look at the CDC's most recent data, tracking where cases are widespread for the week ending on February 10th. It includes Arizona, along with 47 other states and Puerto Rico. In that 1 week, there were 968 lab-confirmed cases in Arizona, bringing the total up to nearly 23,000 flu cases for the entire season. That's an increase of 575% compared to last year. Last year at this time, there were 3,200 cases of the flu. Michael Warby heads the University of Arizona's Ecology and Evolutionary Biology Department and explained why this year's flu season is so severe.
The current flu season is a bad one. We'll probably see more than 50,000 deaths in the U.S. All told, and it will probably kill more people than the 2009 virus did. Now, 2009 was in the news even more because it was what we call a pandemic virus, and that's a special word that we use when a virus moves from the animal reservoir into the human population. So it's a new virus. It has the potential to be explosive. The 2009 virus was bad, but nowhere near as bad as some of the pandemic viruses, influenza viruses that we've seen in the past.
Okay, you're a scientist. You know why. Can you give us some indication as to how we got to this point?
We know some of why. We don't know all of the reasons. And with flu, there are big years and there are small years. We know a little bit of why that is. There are a few different flu viruses actually that circulate. Two of them are called influenza A viruses, and those are ones that people will have heard about: H1N1, H3N2. Another one, influenza B, also circulates. It's one that rarely makes the news, but it's a pretty nasty virus as well. It actually causes more deaths than H1N1, but fewer deaths than H3N2. And this year is primarily an H3N2 year. That tends to be the virus that causes the most trouble in terms of flu viruses. This year, unfortunately, another factor is the vaccine, the component of it that fights H3N2 is not working as well as we would like. The virus is growing in eggs. And what happens sometimes, scientists choose the virus ahead of time, the strain that we're going to put in those vaccines. We grow it in eggs. The virus can sometimes adapt to the egg cell, small changes that usually don't make any difference at all. On this occasion, a change that the virus made as it's growing in the eggs actually made it sort of not work quite as well at triggering that immune response that we like to see.
In your research, what are you learning about how we've gotten to this point?
My lab has been studying the relationship between the severity of how influenza affects you as an adult, the connection between that and which strain of the flu you first got as a kid. Maybe the key thing is a virus can hurt you if it's quite different than what your immune system imprinted on that very first time you saw influenza as a kid. Okay, so if you know when someone was born and you look back at, okay, what influenza A virus was circulating in humans at that period of time, that's telling you something that is turning out to be really important about how they're going to respond to flu viruses now. These clues are actually now reshaping how flu vaccines are going to be made. So it's a kind of exciting time where ideas that were incubated here at the University of Arizona are really starting to impact the whole national strategy for dealing with this important pathogen.
A sliver of southern Arizona, commonly seen as a destination for retirees, is going through a growth spurt. The proof is in the number of homes being built, schools opening, and businesses relocating. We got a closer look at how it all fits into a grand plan, spearheaded by Oro Valley Mayor Satish Hiremath. Oro Valley got its start in 1974. The vision, a retirement community with stunning views located outside a major metropolitan area. And it was just that for more than 30 years. Then the mindset changed. Satish Hiremath was elected mayor. The town surveyed families and found they wanted to be a more complete community with services to include work and play. Mayor Hiremath put a plan in place called Your Voice, Our Future.
We've all lived in communities where construction seems to be a 20, 25, 30-year project. And so my mandate really to not only the council members at the time, but to the town staff was to say, look, if we're going to build it, let's build it all in a 6 to 8 year period, inconvenience everybody, and then just enjoy life. Developable land left, I believe, is less than 10%.
How is this town council moving forward in deciding who's allowed to build, how much growth to really allow for?
You know, what we do is we take away who's developing and we look for what's going to enhance our community, what segment of our population is not being currently served, and who has a capability of serving the unserved population. So for instance, there was a very strong desire and a strong need for a lot of our senior population to make sure that they're cared for, right? And so that's why you have all these assisted living centers coming up within the last 4 or 5 years. And also with young families coming in, there are early childhood education opportunities that we need to provide for those kind of kids.
A town of about 40,000. The result, $180 million in new private development by the way of more than 80 new businesses, restaurants, arts, and companies, like the upcoming addition of Simpleview. It will bring about 170 employees over to its new location, with space for 80 more employees. Let's go pay. Other new features in town include 2 new schools.
And so did you guys figure out your fuse? Innovation Academy is a STEM-focused K-5 elementary school. The mission of Innovation Academy is that our students are critical thinkers, creative thinkers, and problem solvers, and they're the innovative leaders of tomorrow. And so we use a thematic or project-based approach to instruction, hands-on, minds-on. So if our kids are hands are engaged, minds are engaged, and they're making connections because the themes that we're using are relevant. Okay.
Michael McConnell serves as the principal of Innovation Academy, a K-5 school that opened its doors last fall. Nestled in the heart of a residential community, this school is in the amphitheater district and serves kids from the Oro Valley area and beyond.
We are 100% open enrollment, which means we have students coming from all of our Amphi schools, as well as 23 neighborhoods outside of Amphi. In the next couple years, there's going to be about 3,500 new homes in the Oro Valley area, and these are family homes.
Any resistance to opening a school in a retirement community?
One, we were very respectful of the neighborhood. We had, as a district, we had community meetings with them. We have a 9 o'clock start time. Does 2 things for us. One, we're respectful of the folks in the neighborhood who need to get out and off to work. And then for our students who are traveling 25, 30 minutes to school, they're not standing at a bus stop at 6:30 in the morning. So our pickup times are generally around 8 o'clock, and we provide transportation from all Amphi schools.
Boasted as one of the greenest schools in the state, designers built this school with the future in mind.
It is my hope that Innovation Academy is kind of the direction our schools will go. As a whole, not just as a district, but as a state. Providing our students with hands-on relevant curriculum, so where our kids are learning concepts, they're seeing where they fit in the world.
With change comes growing pains. Logan Birch Booth covers Oro Valley for The Explorer. He writes about the cultural shift that's taking place.
You know, I think any change is met with resistance. The town doubled in population over 20 years, and I think when you look at a community that was founded primarily retirement, you know, it wasn't an entirely retirement community, but mostly of that population. It's changed over 20 years to, there are almost as many people of my age bracket as there are retirees now.
Still an affluent community, the average household income here is more than $70,000. Home values are on average about 60% higher than others in Pima County.
People do like that they live in an affluent community. They do want to see that small but rich town atmosphere continue. There is a fear that if you bring in not like a strip mall, but a big multi-use development, that you're going to get people of different socioeconomic status.
A 2.5% sales tax sustains the growth. Birch Booth says there's a careful balance between the past and the present.
If you go to any town council meeting, someone's probably going to say something about golf, whether or not it's on the agenda. In the community center in general, it is absolutely, I think, the central focus for a lot of people here.
The Innovation Academy, though in its infancy, already has its families thinking about the future of kids in this community.
Because people do talk about that continuing education journey. If you've got a bunch of STEM-focused kids that are doing amazing things, you don't necessarily want them leaving Amphi to go find that same level of education somewhere else.
It's an election year in Oro Valley, an exciting time that could give way to transformation.
From an outsider's perspective, I think that's where the town council is putting a lot of their future, is in that catering to multiple people through one amenity. You know, having fitness, having youth programming, having sports programming. They really are going for that complete community look. What that means, though, varies depending on who you ask.
If you ask Mayor Hiremath,
we're landlocked, and obviously with less than 10% of developable land left, we're looking at annexing certain areas. But the annexations are strategic, and they're very design and goal oriented. So for instance, now Oro Valley on the west side of Oracle goes all the way up to Ina. And with that annexation came acquirement of Tohono Chul Park, which was named the top 10 best botanical gardens in the world by Travel and Leisure. I mean, what a gem that is for the town of Oro Valley. So the annexations are strategic when we look at already developed areas. The undeveloped areas, I think there's 924 acres of land that Oro Valley is looking to annex from the State Land Department.
you have healthcare options, you have industry, education, I mean a university extension as well. What don't you have in this town?
I don't think really we're missing anything substantial. You know, we have incredible public safety. We have great roads to drive on. It's a remarkable community.
Some talk, but still no action from Congress to pass an immigration bill that addresses DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. The Senate rejected 4 proposals last week, including one from President Trump. He supports a lasting solution to DACA, as well as an end to what's now commonly referred to as chain migration. In our conversation last week with immigration attorney Jose Vasquez, we asked what that term actually refers to, as well as other legal dilemmas facing DACA recipients.
Family reunification is at risk at this moment. Okay. It is being referred to as chain migration. And that used to be a term that was non-offensive, but now it is a politically charged term that's relatively new in terms of popular usage. Family reunification is what has been referred to for the past few decades in the situation of a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident wanting to immigrate family members from another country.
We've heard it explained in the press that if you have a loved one that you want to bring in, it's just that one, or does it go beyond that?
Well, the way that it's been represented, especially by the opponents of family reunification, is reckless and disingenuous at best. It is not easy to bring a family member over from abroad, and it applies predominantly to close family members. In other words, an immigrant or a U.S. citizen cannot petition to bring their cousins and their uncles and their grandparents from abroad. It isn't like someone can bring in their spouse, parent, or child and they'll be here in 2 or 3 months. It's more of a 12 to 18 month long process with numerous checks in place.
While we're on the note of families, during the course of our reporting over DACA recipients, there are quite a few who have younger siblings who are U.S. citizens. Mom and dad are not documented. And if DACA goes away, what becomes of those U.S. citizen children?
It depends on their individual situations. Certainly, if they have family who are U.S. citizens or permanent residents that can take them in, that is one option. They have to go through the family courts in order to establish that relationship, but it is an option under certain circumstances. If they have no family who are U.S. citizens or permanent residents, then if they don't join their families abroad, they become essentially wardens of the state.
Many of us had been looking to the early March timeframe as some sort of resolution for DACA, or it was a timeline. Is it still that?
We're hoping something comes out of Congress by that time. For DACA, there was a court injunction that's extended the period for certain types of filings.
This month, Supreme Court justices met to decide if they would hear an appeal of that injunction, which was issued by a lower court in January. A federal judge in New York filed a second injunction that also prevents DACA from ending. Vasquez explained how the rulings affect current DACA recipients.
Anyone who has received DACA in the past or is currently a DACA recipient is able to file for an extension, or in some cases, if their DACA already expired, file another DACA petition that would potentially cover them. The problem with this is that it is essentially in limbo. Now, the Department of Homeland Security is honoring extensions or applications for people who have had DACA in the past, but they're not even adjudicating new DACA applications. And in terms of the time limits, who knows how long this is going to last?
You represent one of the longest running law firms, immigration law firms in the state of Arizona. How is this moment in time really being viewed right now?
It's being viewed as a novelty. We have never seen this before, where there is a very vulnerable group of people, meaning the dreamers, who are at risk. And these are kids, really, for all intents and purposes, they are essentially American. They were raised in the U.S., they've gone to school here, worked hard here, contributed to society. They really are our kids. And they're being used as political pawns for a bigger agenda that will ultimately be detrimental to them anyway. So there's a lot of concern for our most valuable group of people, group of young people who are the dreamers.
Last year, Tucson received a perfect score on an index that measures how inclusive it is to the LGBTQ community. And it's off to a strong start this year with the opening of a new center on 4th Avenue. It's geared toward LGBTQ youth. Vanessa Barchfield takes us there.
It's been 3 weeks since kids first walked through these doors at the Thornhill Lopez Center on 4th in downtown Tucson. Right now it's quiet in here, but when school gets out in a few hours, this room will be filled with young people ages 13 to 26, playing games, making art, doing their homework. In other words, totally standard after-school things in a welcoming community.
As we come down, we also have a full-size residential teaching kitchen.
And Adam Reagan says that's all part of the mission here.
The mission of the center is to provide a safe space for LGBTQ and allied youth to come, know that they are welcome, loved, appreciated in their community, to access service and programs, and just in general, find company and friendship with each other as a community.
This center is new, but the program it's housing has been around for many years, says Angel Brophy, who works with the kids here. It used to be run by the LGBT organization Wingspan, which closed a few years ago. The Southern Arizona AIDS Foundation, or SAFE, took over a few of its programs, including this one. For the past few years, it's been run out of SAFE's offices. Brophy says already the programming is benefiting from having its own home.
We're also able to have one-on-one sessions with the youth. We have a homeless youth service that we provide, and that really involves meeting with the youth one-on-one, sitting down doing short-term goal making in a private session where they can really come out and talk about the needs that they have or some issues that they're dealing with when everybody doesn't have to listen to it.
Deciding what of the hallway gets devoted to that, plus then the art that we're going to hang in it.
Okay.
Brophy and Reagan say those sorts of private conversations are really important because coming out is still challenging for kids.
A few things that some of our LGBT youth are facing, still a lot of stigma.
Acceptance, fear of rejection by family.
They're also experiencing, how do I find my group? How do I find my tribe? You know, like, where are my people?
Folks will notice around the center that a lot of the naming opportunities that we use are reaffirming, you are beautiful, you are welcome, you have a place here. And so one of the challenges of being LGBT as a youth is wondering, am I the only one? And to come to find out, when you come to the Thornhill Lopez Center on 4th, you're not the only one. There is a whole community here that supports you, loves you, and wants you to thrive.
I believe this space was made possible by a $2 million capital campaign. How will it be paid for going forward?
So we actually, when we started the capital campaign, the Southern Arizona AIDS Foundation did a couple focus groups, study groups. We talked to folks in the community and said, what would you support? And resoundingly, everybody across the age spectrum, across every spectrum, said we support helping LGBTQ and allied youth. We really want a youth center, so focus on that. So that's where SAFE kind of took the lead and focused on creating a youth center. And that's where we saw such great success with our capital campaign to purchase this building, renovate it, and get the space up and ready for the programming to happen here. I think going forward, one of the best reminders is that on 4th Avenue, as folks pass by, they'll see a list of donors on the front of the building around the door. And that's not just to recognize our donors, although we're very appreciative of them. It's also to remind the youth that when they walk in, they have a community that cares about them, supports them, would put their name on a building that belongs to the youth. So as we go forward and talk about funding sources and community support, we know that we'll always have the community taking care of our youth because they are our most important resource that we have in Southern Arizona.
Reagan and Brophy say one population they're serving more these days is transgender youth.
One of the big things right now is to make sure that single-stall bathrooms are available to everybody. We don't believe in a boys' bathroom or a girls' bathroom. We believe in everyone's welcome bathroom. So it's been
That's one population that the Trump administration has targeted by scrapping a rule that requires public schools to let kids use the bathroom of their choice.
How is that manifesting in trans kids' lives?
I think what we're seeing is a lot of attempts to roll back some of the progress that we've made recently. But at the same time, I'm choosing to see the resistance. When I talk to our youth, our queer youth of color, they are not letting these temporary 4 years with this particular administration deter them from being their authentic, genuine selves.
Shame on Trump! Protect the trans students!
They are creating, even as those in that administration want to destroy what we've tried to build up. So my hope for the future is stronger than ever, because I know that this is just a momentary blip in the greater American picture. These youth will continue to thrive, and coming to a place like the Thornhill Lopez Center on 4th is a good start for them to help find a space for themselves.
And although it's still in the early days, Angel Brophy says she's already seen a lot of successes.
Any youth that can come here and feel comfortable, that's successful to me. Success is having a youth get an HIV test. Success is having a youth we've been doing jigsaw puzzles, so participate in an activity. Having a youth even talk to another adult is sometimes success here. So really, success in the lounge is that when you are able to walk through that door, that's success to me.
And that's all for this week. If you have any feedback, send us an email, arizona360@azpm.org. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.